everyone and welcome back to my channel. This is Glossy Philosophy. My name is Jansen Binman. Make sure that you are subscribed to this channel. Give this video a thumbs up because today we are talking about the third installment of The Drowning Empire, The Bone Shard War by Andrea Stewart, so stay tuned. Today we are finishing off our Drowning Empire chat with The Bone Shard War by Andrea Stewart, and oh my goodness, is it a doozy. We are 2 years past the end of book 2, The Bone Shard Emperor, and the world and the characters are in chaos. Everything is literally falling apart. The empire is falling apart. Characters are falling apart. Islands are sinking. Jovis is being held prisoner and Lynn is trying to hold everything together with her bare hands. Now, clearly based on the title, you know that at the end of the story there's going to be an epic, and I mean epic, battle between all of these characters and all of these factions of the Empire, between the Shardless few, between Reagan, between Lynn, and whomever else she can kind of coerce into fighting with her. And you do have to wait until almost the very end to find out who gets to be in power and who is going to win. Now, on top of all of this excitement and adventure, one of the things that I really loved about this book is that it goes perfectly with our theme, which is, what are we fighting for? And at some point in the book, characters will either ask themselves this and or be asked by other characters, what are we fighting for? Why are we still fighting? And just trying to understand that meaning, and if you get what you want, is that still what you are looking for? Now, the interesting thing about all this 2-year and personal mental growth with the characters that happens throughout the book is that in an interview I heard Andrea Stewart say that she wanted to start the book at the lowest possible point for all of these characters and then take them even lower. Because where do we have the most growth? We have the most growth when we have mistakes, when we fall down, when we are at our lowest of low. The only place to go is up, especially when your world is literally and figuratively in every possible way completely falling apart. She said that she did write some storylines that happened in that 2-year gap, and originally she was going to start the book immediately right after The Bone Shard Emperor, where that one ends, but realized in order to get the emotional growth that she wanted for her characters, they needed time apart. They needed time to go on their own misadventures and get some things done and then talk about that and grow as we end this book and really step into their own for some of them, and for others completely lose their minds. Now, before we get into all the things that I really loved about this book, let's talk about a couple things that I found a little frustrating. And by the way, if you haven't read any of the Drowning Empire, stop now, read them, and then come back and watch this. And especially if you haven't read the last book, you have to read that because there are going to be spoilers all over the place. So just be aware. All right, a couple things I found frustrating. Number one, Jovis. He was one of my favorite characters, and he still is. I love how Andrea Stewart wrote him. I think he is the most human of everyone in certain physicality ways, just the fact that he is actually human, but also just how he reacts to things, how he picks himself up, how he doesn't pick himself up sometimes. He is almost the anti-hero, but we desperately want him to be, and so does he. He wants to be a hero, and yet there are so many moments in this book where he mentally berates himself and says that he can't do something, and how can he possibly be a hero when he's done all these horrible things, even though he was under control of someone else. So on first reading, and I've read this book twice now, on first reading, and I read it right when it came out. I pre-ordered it. I'm a huge fan of this series, so the first time I read it, I was so mad at Jovis until the very end when he does kind of feel like grow up a little bit and step into his own once again. The second time I read it, I felt, oh my gosh, he's such a human, and how frustrating is it that I know I have personally done this, and I know many of you have probably done this too. You kind of beat yourself up mentally over things that you either had no control over or you were just doing the best that you could with the hand that was dealt you. And it might not have been the heroic thing to do. It might not have been the absolute most amazing thing for you to do, but you did the best that you could, and you have to move on and you have to step up to the plate again and again. And sometimes when we read really human things and characters, I personally get really frustrated because I want them to be better than I am. I don't want them to have the same frailties as I do or as humans do. But of course, if we need someone to kind of balance out all these godlike other characters, we need someone like Jovis to remind us that we need to see the bigger picture and cut ourselves some slack. The second thing that I found really frustrating, which is something I think I mentioned in the Bone Shard Emperor, is that Regan is crazy. I mean, he is so evil that it almost doesn't make any sense. I know that Andrea Stewart tries to explain through the other characters like why he became so crazy, but it just feels like Regan goes from 0 to 100 and we're missing all of these steps in between for his honestly psychopathic mentality and his insane drive to end everything, especially at the end. He completely loses touch with everything and he wants to sink the Empire instead of just giving up or surrendering or anything else. It's the only way. It's almost like he's asking Jovis and begging him or begging Ayesh to please stop him before he does this. And of course, Jovis is finally able to stop Regan by ending his life and therefore ending the terror and his horrible reign that he has done for the last 1.5 books. On the flip side, here are some really cool things that I discovered the second time reading, and that is the power of children to remind adults who they should be and how they should be acting by they themselves trying to act like adults. So we have Ayesh, who's probably around 14 years old, who is trying to take on like all the Shardless Few and Regan at several moments, and it takes her bravery and her courage and her foolhardiness to remind Jovis to snap out of it, step back into the role of being an adult and being a warrior and being this mystical man and actually doing his job that he's supposed to do. Whether or not he becomes a hero again, he has to step up and do the best that he can do, and he doesn't make that connection until he sees Ayesh, the 14-year-old, going after Regan all by herself. So I think that's a really, really great lesson because Ayesh is constantly teaching the adults throughout this entire book of reminding them that they need to step up and lead, and they need to be courageous, and they need to have a little bit of her in them in order to fulfill the best part of themselves. Another part that I really loved is just all the transformations and the mental and emotional growth that some characters take, and it takes almost until page 550, 560 for a lot of them to realize and come and again step into their own. So we have Geo, who is also Diane, who is like the Alanga of the past, and he's super powerful and all that, whatever. When Lynn comes to terms with the fact that she can no longer be the emperor unless she wants to see not only her island sunk, but also just everything that she's worked for completely fall in the drain. She abdicates, and she does so publicly, and Diane steps forward and has a really hard time taking exactly what he said that he wanted this entire time. In fact, he says to Raname when she comes in and checks on him hours later, he says, "I lost control. Lynn did what I asked." And then he goes on to say, "And I didn't know what to do with that." And in that space of unknown, Regan stepped forward and took it way too far with all of my soldiers. And it's almost like a cautionary tale of when we're thinking about this question of what are you fighting for? What is Diane fighting for? There are several moments in the book when the characters ask that question either to him or just in conversations together. What is he fighting for? Is he still actually fighting for a republic and a council and to get the emperor deposed? But when Lynn says that she's done and he can have the empire as long as he sets up a council, all of a sudden he becomes very confused and doesn't know if that's actually what he wants, because we find out that what he really wants is vengeance. But luckily Diane is old enough and smart enough to know that that's not a great way to go. So he takes a step back, and unfortunately someone else steps forward and takes that vengeance. And I love when Lynn is reflecting after she gives up the empire publicly. I love how she describes Diane. She says that he's not a monster, and that as much as she knows he says that this is all he wants, what he actually wants is to fix the past, which cannot be fixed. And again, it's another really great lesson to all of us readers that the past cannot be fixed, at least as far as we know. And all you can do is move forward and do the best that you can with the hand that you are dealt. And you might have to reassess, what are you fighting for? Are you fighting for the same things? Is your heart true? Or have you started fighting for something else along the way that you didn't even know kind of snuck in there? So now I just want to go through a lot of the characters and ask that question, what are you fighting for, and kind of what their outcome was. And yes, I did make notes on purple paper, which I think you'll appreciate also matches the book. You're welcome. So we're going to start with Regan, because his is probably the most dramatic and not dramatic at the same time, because he's kind of just a one-note, two-dimensional character, right? He never really has a character arc. He never really expands as a character. He's just like, this is what I want. It's very clear. He tricks people, but we as the reader know that he's crazy. So Regan, what is he fighting for? He says that he's fighting for the empire, but I think he's really just fighting for vengeance, and he just wants everyone to suffer the way that he says that he has also suffered. And he dies. He's so determined to get his own way in a very childish manner that he's willing to have everything completely destroyed rather than just to admit defeat. Sand. Now, Sand was one of the most beautiful transformations, I think. Maybe beautiful is the wrong word. One of the most powerful transformations in this book, especially at the end. In the second book, I also thought she was a psychopath. But in this book, we start to see the cracks happening. We start to see her thinking through things a little bit more, and her seeing the world through Regan's eyes and also through someone else's eyes. And she becomes a little bit more human and less construct-like, and she just becomes a little bit more three-dimensional. And I think it's a good, interesting balance between her and Regan, even though she allows him to abuse her mentally, and it's just a very awful relationship between the two of them. But I love the end when they storm into the palace and she finds that extra body of Chien, and then she says goodbye, because she not only realizes that Nisong's love and Chien's love was maybe not as love-like as she had remembered, because memories are really tricky things, but also that she isn't Nisong. She is Sand. She is her own person, her own construct, so she has her own path and needs to stop living in the past, kind of like Diane. So she makes this huge shift at the very end and helps swing the war a different way and starts to become a better person. And Lynn eventually will help her start that journey with some bone shard magic, and then she's like kind of rewarded at the very, very end of the book, becoming Alanga herself and getting exactly what she wants while also remaining kind of a pariah to society. So her story has one of the most interesting conclusions in this book. And then of course we have Jovis, who I think is probably one of everyone's favorite characters, along with his Mephi. And he, unfortunately, because he finally steps up, and perhaps he steps up a little bit too late, but he does. He steps up and he saves the day by getting rid of Regan, and unfortunately he pays with his life for a very short amount of time and with his memories, because Lynn puts him in this pool and he completely loses most of his memories and has to kind of rebuild them, so that at the very end when he approaches Lynn again, it's a really lovely moment of here are two people who are going to create a new life. And it's almost better that Jovis doesn't have a bunch of his memories, because because he was very haunted by them through most of the book and had a really hard time getting over them. So it's almost like a grace that he was able to wipe out his memory of the past few years and kind of just start fresh. He feels like a different person, and he says that several times. But you get the feeling that at the end of the book, he and Lynn will be able to find some kind of relationship together, and it might even be better than it was before. Diane also has a really great transformation. After Ranami comes and talks to him, it's like a spark gets flared back up in him, and we don't see it again until the war is over. But we know from Lynn's chapter that Diane is actually helping a lot of the Ilanga to better themselves and learn to control their power, so hopefully the past won't repeat itself, and he is finally forced to live in the here and now and stop living in the past. So he gets exactly what he wants. He takes a step back when he realizes that he could go down a dark path, and then he steps up to the plate once more and does good. And then of course Lynn, I mean, she is just a powerhouse. She is like top 5 female characters ever written. She is so cool and so courageous and so brave, and I love her character so much. The fact that she steps down in front of everybody and has this moment before she does of, I've been trying to fix the empire by playing with the old rules. We have all these people who are playing with past rules instead of playing with what's happening right now. And I think a lot of us can understand that and relate to that often, especially in times of crisis, we go to the past to look for what to do, but sometimes we need to be flexible and open our minds to what's happening right now, and how can I get exactly what I want with what's being dealt to me right now. So Lynn says she always wanted to be a better emperor than her father, and she always wanted what was best for the empire. And then she realizes that what's best for the empire is to stop the war and for her to step down as emperor so they can create a council. She might not fully understand it, but she understands that that's what her people need. And so that makes her the best emperor by stepping down and letting them lead themselves. But she doesn't just go off into the distance and never seen again. She really digs into research with Diane, and they are trying to even help the normal citizens, the non-Ilanga citizens, with transportation and just making their lives better. So she's a powerhouse, and I love her. And of course, Ranami, we can't not talk about her. She is probably feels like one of the weakest characters throughout all the stories, and then at the very end, she is the only character who never uses violence. She only uses words, and she doesn't use any magic. So it feels like she's set up really beautifully as like this weak character, and yet it is the power of her words and the power of her actions and her kindness and her courage that bring people to her and help her become a great leader and help her establish a council and help her listen to other people, because she doesn't have a great past and she's always trying to live in the here and now, which is something that most people aren't able to do in this series. Thank you guys so much for watching this book talk. I hope if you have read The Drowning Empire, I hope you loved it, and if you did, I want to know which book is your favorite. If you read The Bone Shard War, tell me what you thought. Tell me what you thought of all the character arches. Who's your favorite character? What's your favorite scene? I have so many favorite moments, but most of them honestly happen towards the end because the beginning of the book is so intense and so low with everybody. You're just like, something good has got to happen. If you are reading along with me, I have the next few months listed below, so please check out those books. It's going to be so fun. On Friday, I'm doing this makeup look tutorial, so make sure that you check that out. And I will see you very soon in the next one. Bye!